You're listening to the Vint Podcast, where we bring you interviews and stories from around the world of wine and spirits. From winemakers and critics to sommeliers and master distillers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping the future of today's food and drinks culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Podcast. My name is Brady, joined back in studio by Billy Galanko. How are you, Billy?
Doing very well today. It's an exciting day.
Yeah, this is a milestone episode for the Vint Podcast. Today we're announcing, actually earlier this week we announced, but this is our first episode featuring our new partner, Coravin, the wine preservation system that you and I talk a lot about here on the podcast. And I actually used this past weekend. I had a back vintage bottle of red wine I brought to a dinner party, and everyone else brought like cocktail mixers and things like that. And they're like, it's too hot. So I poured myself a glass and I used my Coravin, didn't have to open the cork. And now I still have that bottle and I got to have my wine. People got to have their gin and tonic. It was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like we talk about how we use our Coravin almost every weekend anyway. So this fits perfectly. But with this partnership, I now have the excuse to share more stories about my time with Coravin, how I got my first one, how it's helped me in my studies. So I'm really excited for the partnership. And then also our interview today to kick this off. We were lucky enough to have the founder of Coravin on and join us for a conversation to talk about how it came to be. I learned so much about the device and it actually made me like it even more.
Yeah, Greg Lambrecht, who we have on the podcast today, is the founder, like you said, of Coravin, and has a background actually in medical devices. And so it was really fascinating to hear him talk about how he pulled from a lot of the materials that they would use in operating rooms, doing spinal surgery and those kinds of things, devices that he had developed on that side, how he brought over and pieced together his own makeshift Coravin more than 10 years ago that he was just using at his house. And now they're using a proper product in wineries and restaurants all around the world. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's really interesting to think that in the 90s, he was developing his own prototype. This is what happens when you have an inventor who loves wine. Somebody can actually just put things together, but you also have somebody who is meticulous in his testing. I can't remember. He goes on to talk about how long he tested his first prototype before he even brought it out of the house to try to show people. So it's like when you realize how much R&D, personal R&D went into that original device, and then how much more has gone into each subsequent Coravin model that's come out since, it really makes you appreciate like the quality and the testing that goes in before it even gets to you.
Yeah, I know we talked about it a little bit on our accessories episode we did a few weeks back, but I really think outside of actual wine and maybe glasses and a corkscrew, my Coravin is the most important accessory I have. It's probably more important than a corkscrew because you don't actually need a corkscrew if you have a Coravin, which is, the beauty of having access to your entire cellar all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. But it turns out, as Greg taught us, I've actually not been cleaning mine properly. I wasn't necessarily storing the bottles properly. So he gave us a lot of tips in here, and we have a lot of, we will have tips and tricks to share and resources that people can look to get the most out of their Coravin, because I've loved it and I wasn't even using it to its fullest potential. So
that's right. Yeah, we really enjoyed this interview with Greg. I hope listeners get a lot out of it. It's a great introduction to the Coravin brand. We also have a promo code for all of our listeners. It's Vint15, so VINT 15. You can use that at Coravin's website for 15% off anything on the site. So that's really great. We'll have that throughout the length of our partnership, as well as some other giveaways and promotions and cool stuff like that. Thanks for tuning in. This is our interview with Greg Lambrecht. Hey, Greg, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Brady. I'm psyched to be able to do this before all my travels.
Yeah, this partnership that we're starting out with Coravin is one that Billy and I have talked about for a long time, because it's probably after actually having wine in your house, it's probably the thing that you need most if you're trying to get into wine seriously. So yeah, it's exciting to have you on and looking forward to hearing about the story of Coravin.
Yeah, it's a fun story as wine is, right? And as life in wine can very well be. You've got to be doing something wrong for wine not to be fun.
Yeah, everyone we have on has a different sort of roundabout way of coming into the space. I assume you have similar. I don't know. Did you grow up from when you were 11 drinking 100-year-old port with your grandfather, or we've heard those stories, or did you come to it later in life? What's your story of how you got into wine initially?
So it was illegally young. So I'm not quite 11, but I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't drink when I was a kid. My family didn't drink. My dad's was a type 1 diabetic. And so he didn't drink his entire life long. He would always order a scotch, I remember, and let it sit there with the ice just slowly melting. And I was like, why scotch? And he said, because it looks cool. But he never, ever sipped it. And so I hadn't had alcohol, but I was living in Southern California. And I finished growing when I was 12, and I grew a beard when I was 13 or 14. And so my friends were like, you look older than the rest of us. We're going to drive up to Napa. You walk in first. Convince them that we're 21. And so I went into Tony Peju's winery, Peju Wines, and tasted my first wine when I was 16 and never looked back. I remember grilling the guy. I was like, I've never tasted anything this great. Doesn't taste at all like a grape. Why is that? Show me how you made this wine. And Tony was super kind and walked me through how we made the wine. I fell in love with it then. I went through college exploring. I was Californian, and so I thought California makes the best wine. Why would I drink anything else? But then I had a teacher from Poland, and she was like, you should really try white Burgundy. And I did, thank goodness, and never looked back after that. And so then I fell in love with its variety. When you open the doors and you leave your home state or your home region where you're drinking wine or whatever it is that your parents drank, and now you start to explore the different countries, the different regions, the different varieties, the different grapes. It's like this palette of paint that's infinitely broad, and you can make all sorts of different paintings with it. And it kept me fascinated. So it was always a part of my life from the time I was 16, but it was never really a career or a focus, just something that I enjoyed.
Yeah, before we dive into how you started Coravin, I completely agree with your sentiment on you should try everything about all of the wines around the world. It's interesting because I grew up similarly. My parents could drink, but they had like light beer. I grew up in like southeastern Virginia. And when I started studying wine, I didn't really know anything about it and just hopped right in. And I immediately started where you are now, of reading about what Psalms were drinking and just like trying wines from all over the world. And then I found out in a backward manner that people basically will pick one or two either regions or even just producers they like and just drink that wine only all the time. And I was like, how can you? And then they would explain that, like, I don't want to buy a dud bottle or something I don't like, which I think is so cool. With where Coravin is kind of like opened up, at least for me, the world is like that. You can try these things and not have to like necessarily waste a bottle. Say if like you open it and you don't like it, you don't want to finish it all at one time. You can taste it and try a bunch of different things at once and maybe share with others if you want to. Maybe it's not your favorite. So I just wanted to jump in there on that.
Just a quick story on that. I've had the pleasure of meeting people on all sides of the wine industry, including major retailers. And one of the biggest is Majestic in the UK. We visited their headquarters. Their CEO is there, and they're like Total Wine of the United Kingdom. And they said, we track people over the course of their life and all the different wines that they buy. And the total number of different wines the average person buys over the course of their life, total number of different wines, 6. And it's exactly because of the reason you said. It's fear of spending a lot of money on a bottle of wine you don't like. And once you find a wine that you like, a lot of people are like, good, I'm done. I like this. I'm just going to drink that all the time. I'll have it at the home. And when I'm out at a restaurant, that's what I'll be looking for on the wine list. And you're right. It is sad. It's that hesitation that comes with the fact that you've got to buy 750 milliliters of wine and you don't know if you're going to like it, and you're going to open it whether or not it's ready because you don't know. And then you're going to be drinking that wine, and your spouse is going to be drinking it too until it's gone, right? And then maybe you'll buy a different wine. So it's a broken system that we've evolved since the 1600s, when wine first showed up in a glass bottle that was 750 milliliters ish with a cork, right? That we're trapped in the way that we can purchase and consume wine.
But you didn't come to Coravin as a wine person first and foremost, more as an inventor, right? Like you brought that part of yourself to Coravin more than your wine interest, or do you feel like they were like perfectly fused in that project? How did that story happen?
Yeah, I am lucky. I got hired by a guy who's actually one of my co-founders at Coravin when I first started working in medicine. But I've been an inventor ever since I was young. I was always making stuff for myself that didn't exist. If it didn't exist, I'd make it, right? And I began to realize that the key to a good invention is a clear understanding of the problem itself. It's a unique perspective on the unmet need that results in a unique solution that can be a great invention. And so I used that in my first career in physics when I was doing plasma fusion, and then my second career in medicine, which has been with me my whole life, it seems. And I've been inventing in medicine since I was 23, looking for these unmet needs. And one of them was in chemotherapy delivery, in high flow vascular access, in vascular access when you walk into a hospital. And all three of these things involved a needle. So I'd gotten really good at needles at the age of 23, 24, different needles that we have a lot of them in medicine, different needles that can go in and out of things without doing damage to them. And there was that inventor background, the medical piece. And then there was the frustration that in order to explore wine, I had to commit to the bottle. As soon as you pull the cork, air gets in. You pour the wine, more air gets in. Really, the majority gets in when you're pouring. And then you're on a clock, right? You're going to finish that bottle before it oxidizes, which is, it starts to deteriorate in a day or two, and then really starts to go downhill, most wines 3-4 days. And so that stops you. It does two things. It forces you to drink that wine until it's gone. And it also stops you from opening the next wine unless you've got like lots of friends around or your spouse likes different wines that you like. And so I wanted to be able to taste 5 different wines in an evening, like what you do when you go to a wine tasting event or a trade show. I wanted to be able to do that at home. I was like, why can't I buy 6 different wines from this one region and then have a taste of each and really learn about this grape variety or this region and have it in my head all at the same time because I'm tasting them all side by side. And when a friend comes over, you're sheepishly looking at them going, I've got 2 bottles in the fridge that are open. I hope you like them.
Yeah.
And they drink what's open, not what they want. And then my spouse and I never agreed on what it is that we wanted to drink that night. And at the time, she loved Nebbiolo, and I love Nebbiolo. And I've got a lot of friends in Piemonte. I love Barolos and Baronescos. They're great, but not every day. And her particular characteristic was, she liked really good news that she loved really good Barolo. And so I'd open a really good bottle of Barolo, or so I thought, and she'd go, this isn't ready. I don't want this one. And so now I've got this great bottle of Barolo open, and she's right. And so we're looking at this bottle and going, okay, I guess I'll open another one. And then you open another one. And hopefully within the first 3 bottles open, we found one that we actually wanted to drink that night that was ready. And then I've got these 2 that aren't ready that I got to figure out what to do with. And so there was a growing frustration in my wine experience that ultimately led me to go, hey, there's an unmet need here. And if I could write it down, maybe I can solve it and at least fix this problem for myself. And that's really, so inventor first, medicine second. So I had a good understanding of technology, and then running into this problem, the tyranny of the 750, and trying to break myself from that so I could learn faster, enjoy more, and make my friends and my spouse happier.
You said you had a prototype at home that you had used for a while before trying to make a business out of it. I understand maybe you had needles and stuff from work. Did you also just have like tanks of like neutral gas at home? Yeah, argon.
Yeah. No, but I developed a product or worked on a product that used an argon plasma in surgery. And I'd also worked in high energy plasma physics. And so I had a lot of ionized gases in that experience. And so I wound up, I didn't get on the TSA watch list, but I started to look for inert gases because I first had a needle and a syringe, and I stuck the needle through the cork, and I did what a lot of doctors do. I tried to suck the wine out. But if the cork is good, you create a vacuum and it tries to suck it back. And so I was like, okay, I can't do that. I got to push the wine out. I'll use an inert gas. And so what are widely available inert gases? And I said, I can get argon, nitrogen, helium, and CO2 pretty easily, and even in compressed capsules. And so I found this place in New Jersey that was willing to ship me some capsules of different gases. And then I had a trigger that I built to allow me to push the gas in. And I ultimately got to the idea of a regulator, which is a very important part of the technology. It's essentially, no matter what the inlet pressure to a regulator, the outlet pressure is constant, and you can set that constant outlet pressure. And so the very first one I made did not have a regulator, and it's essentially the world's most powerful stomp rocket. Luckily, it was a rented house, and the large portions of the bottle wound up hitting the tile in the kitchen, the opposing wall. When you put 2,800 pounds per square inch into a bottle, very, very many things happen very quickly, and none of them are good. But anyway, the second prototype had a regulator. I did make a big purple cloud, and my 3-year-old son very much appreciated it. He was like, "Do it again!" But yeah, those were the necessary pieces. And my technical background in physics and engineering made it was possible for me to assemble the first truly working prototype in, I'd say, about 2-3 weeks. I had a day job, so I was always doing this at night. And the first day that I had the first prototype of Coravin, I drank 5 different bottles. I had part of a glass of 5 different wines and put them back in my rack. And I was like, I guess I've done it. But then I was like, okay, it's got to work. I have to believe that the wine that's remaining in the bottle is no different from a bottle of the same wine that's never been touched. And so just for me to have no hesitation to drink from any bottle or serve from any bottle, I had to believe that. And so I'm a scientist and I do clinical trials. And I was like, okay, I'll buy a half case of wine. I'll Coravin a little bit out of this first bottle. I'll write the date and the gas and the pressure I was using and the needle size and design. And then I'll come back to it at a month and then maybe 6 months and then maybe a year and then 2 years and then maybe 5 years, with adding a new bottle every time and tasting the wines that had all been accessed and saved, and then see, have they actually changed? Can I blind taste and not tell the difference? And that led to what wound up being 8 years of testing. And I honestly, when I came up with it, I didn't think it was something anybody else wanted. I thought it was just me. So didn't think of it as a company.
So you weren't necessarily thinking about all of the commercial and applications like in wineries or restaurants or these kinds of buy the bottle service or buy the glass service. All of that sort of came later in their exploration.
Yeah, it was always pull from friends. It was friends would come over to my house and they'd see me drinking this way. And I would always say, have whatever you want, pick whatever bottle you want, and we'll pour you a glass if you want another wine, sure. And they'd say, hey, can I have one of those? And so I started making them for friends. One of them, the first one that left my place, was this guy, Ryan Drant, who's a big investor in my medical companies, also in Coravin. And Ryan was getting married. And I was like, wow, this is a unique wedding gift. And then he showed it to his friends. And I remember going into a wine store, because my design spec for myself was, if I can make this so easy that I could steal a glass of wine from Marty's Newton, my favorite wine store in Massachusetts, if I can steal a glass of wine and they can't spot me doing it, then it's easy enough to use. And so I went up to Marty and I was like, hey, by the way, I'm going to steal a glass of wine and I promise I'll buy the bottle, but you don't know when it's going to happen, so that he would be watching me. When I came in, it's a busy store. And so I took a glass of Chateauneuf and walked up to him with this glass. And I was like, yeah, I just stole this glass. And he goes, how'd you do it? And I showed him and he goes, wait a second. And he grabs me, he takes me to the back and there's a wine distributor there. And I show him what you did. And I like do it to the bottle with the prototype. And Marty looks at me and goes, what do you think? And the guy goes, I'm restraining myself from hitting him over the head with a bottle and stealing that thing. Because this would change my life. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And I showed it to a guy in a restaurant here in Boston, Grill 23. They have a great wine cellar. And he was like, yeah, come downstairs. And I came downstairs and he's like, look at these bottles. Some of these bottles are really expensive. I cannot sell them by the bottle. I cannot. And they've been sitting here forever. Now, it's great on my wine list, but nobody buys them. I want to be able to sell them by the glass. Give me one of these. And so I started to get this feeling like, okay, this could be a company. And other people have the same need that I've got. If I could turn it into a company in consumer products, which I didn't know at all, then maybe this could be something. And so in 2011, a friend of mine convinced me to start the business and never looked back.
That's awesome. That's a I feel like a classic inventor story where you have an absolutely incredible idea, but you just sit on it for 10, 15 years thinking that no one else wants it until
Yeah.
it's that moment that you had. That's really great. As you sort of like started to commit more full time to, hey, we're going to make this a real thing, what were some of the initial hurdles with moving from those early prototypes to what we see now? Because like I imagine before, were these initial units made of wood or sort of or the sleek plastic that we have now, metal and plastic that we have now?
The first prototypes were all metal. They looked very threatening and medical. I took an old rabbit cork pull as a handle to clamp onto the neck of the bottle, and I made them look relatively good. The problem was their cost.
Hmm.
The needles were costing me $70, $80 a piece. They're medical needles, reusable. The regulator was costing me $70, $80 a piece. And that doesn't make for a business. And so we had to figure out how to reduce cost. We had to make it work easier and look better for sure. And what's interesting is I started a lot of medical companies, and the keys to success in medical are very similar to the keys to success at Coravin and consumer products. And it takes the right investors, raising money at the right value at the right times for the right reasons, and then hiring an extraordinary team of people who are dedicated to making it a success. And so the big challenge up front was finding the right person to lead the company. I knew that I couldn't, and I was lucky enough to run into Nick Lazaris, who had built Keurig coffee company from zero to $1 billion. And Nick was retired and teaching at Harvard, and I wanted him on my board. And he looked at me at the end of our breakfast and said, "Can I be the CEO?" I was like, "Hell yes, you can." He hired a guy named Mike Ryder, who had worked at Polaroid and in R&D and then at iRobot. He's our VP of R&D, Chief Operating Officer now, but he joined us very early on. Really wonderful R&D team. And those guys did the impossible. I remember somebody telling me, "Hey, this company's going to fail. Nobody can make an accurate regulator for that little money at those pressures. Nobody can do that. A lot of companies have tried and they fail. You can't do that." And Mike and team did it. And we now have, oddly, the world's most accurate, least expensive, high pressure gas regulator on the planet. Weird, right? You wouldn't think that Coravin would be a regulator company, but it's what we've made. There were a lot of technical hurdles to making it an actual consumer product, but these guys never missed a timeline and were able to deliver something. It's a challenging task. Normally, when you make a consumer product, it's for the consumer at home. And very rarely is it used in the professional world as well in the same embodiment. And to make something that was durable enough for a restaurant, that was inexpensive enough for a consumer, was the real challenge. And the original Coravins, Mike was very proud. You can military test 6 feet on the concrete. I used to drop them on the floor to show them how they could survive, because we put them in restaurants for a year before we launched to see what broke, and then we would fix it. And so in the end result, we had this great thing. We could just drop it 6 feet on the concrete. You can still do that with Coravin today. And I stopped doing it when I scarred somebody's floor, had a nice oak floor, took a chunk out of it. I'm sorry. But yeah, you still see some of those original Coravins around today, 10, 12 years later, 11 years later, since we launched in 13.
So when you guys launched, did you launch mainly in the Northeast, or did it? I'm just thinking, like, I was recently in Croatia, and they have Coravins, not obviously, but they're obviously new there because they had this whole sheet telling us about this innovative new technology called Coravin and why they could serve these things by the glass. And I thought it was cool. It's like these laminated things. I saw it like multiple parts of the country. So I'm like, clearly this is still solving a need, but it's slowly disseminating everywhere in the world. So did it just start in the Northeast and build from there, or like, how did you get them out there?
We had very little money, and so focus was really important. When you bring a new technology into an ancient industry, right? Wine is 8,000 years old. It's cork and glass for the last 350 years, and a lot of tradition, right? And a lot of failed product in wine preservation. And so I'd done all this work, all this research to prove that it worked, right? To myself. But the question was, how good's my palate? It doesn't change for me. Does it change for other people? And can they pick it up? And so we decided that we were going to go to the winemakers first. We use Coravin, our product, on their product. Without them, we don't exist. And I didn't want a winery to see Coravin for the first time in the restaurant and go, what the hell is that thing? And so we were very cautious to go to the wine. Our rule is the wine country makes wine. We go to the wineries first. And we let them test it on their wines, and we'll do blind tastings with them at 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and even out to 5 years now in Burgundy. So we started in the United States with the wine producers in California, Oregon, and Washington. And then we went and did blind tasting events for top sommelier all over the country: Houston, Dallas, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, all the places where, in Miami, all the places wine is big, right? And we wanted to show the sommelier that they can feel comfortable serving their wines by the glass. And so we did instead of a geographic thing in the United States, we strategically went after the sort of top of the pyramid being the winemakers, right beneath them being the restaurateurs and sommelier and then wine stores. And then we figured press would see it. And then if it was in the wineries and it was in the restaurants and it was in the wine stores and the press was talking about it, the consumer would find out. That was the strategy. And we started that in 2013. We waited until in July of 2013. We got contacted by Harrods in October of 2013. And they were like, so we're selling this? We're going to sell this? You're coming here? So the second country we launched was the UK. And then went out to France and repeated what we had done in the United States, in Bordeaux and Burgundy. Wish I'd gotten to the Rhone. Still haven't gone there. It's my favorite wine in the world, and I haven't gone to the Rhone yet. But we did so many events in Paris. And so that's how we spread across the world. And we launched in Europe in 2014. And then we took it to Asia in 2015 and Australia, New Zealand. So we've been conscious that we wanted the whole wine world to know about it at roughly the same time. And so as a small company, we worked really hard to get around the world. Now, Croatia is a special story. I have a spinal implant. The very first surgeon to implant it was in Croatia. And I brought Coravin to Croatia very early on. And actually, there was probably one of the early prototypes in about 2008, 9 that showed up in Croatia. Because I love the country, I love the food, I love the wine, I love the people. It's a great place.
Oh, cool. I didn't know. I'm excited now to tell my fiance. But I was just going to note it's so funny. You haven't gone to the Rhone, but like Burgundy is like, what, an hour and a half, 2 hours away from like the Northern Rhone? You were so close.
Yeah, I was so close. I've been so close so many times. I'm overscheduled. I have 2 companies. I've always had 2 companies, and it keeps me flat out. So I work 7 days a week and travel all over the world and go from place to place as quick as I can.
I'm sure. Yeah, we visited Provence a year ago, and I was like telling my fiance, I'm just going to pop up to at least go look at Chateauneuf, or I want to see the Hill of Hermitage. And she was, I'm not even running 2 companies. And she's like, no, we don't have time for that. What if I wake up early?
What if I wake up early? I would love, the greatest invention is to cram more hours into a day. Right? That'd be great.
A 25-hour day.
Yeah. I would love it.
Well, can you, I want our listeners to be able to get a sense from you, as deep as you want to go, walk through the current product line and how that evolved, maybe the use cases and how something like, for instance, the sparkling device came to be, which I know is that the most recent, I believe the most recent release?
It is the most recent commercially available. We've got a new system called Vinitas that we're still in that test phase with early commercialization. But yeah, and sparkling has changed my life in a very positive way. So we started with what we now call the Timeless. Timeless is our needle-based system, pushes a needle through the cork or our screw cap, and then it displaces the wine out of the bottle through that needle using argon gas. Argon wound up being the best of the gases. My sons and I breathed all the helium, but it wasn't a good gift for wine preservation. Argon's wonderful. It's a noble gas, has no known chemical reactions, no smell, no taste. It really is like nothing. It replaces the wine with nothing. It's just truly inactive space, which is great. And so that can allow you to preserve your wine for years. I've done a blind tasting at 20 years with that, just in London, with a 2002 dirt cheap Shiraz from actually a good producer. But that's what I was drinking way back when. Anyway, it can keep the wine indefinitely if the cork is in good shape. It's used by restaurants and wineries. It's used by a lot of people at home. It means that there's no clock ticking. You can drink it whenever you want. The However, when I was in Australia, I had this wonderful guy who I think originally is an American, sounds like maybe a New Yorker, who's in Sydney. He runs a restaurant called the Stunned Mullet, Lou. And our tradition, whenever I was in Australia for either wine or spine surgery, the last night he would pull together a bunch of guys and we'd all bring bottles and drink way too much. And then Lou would unleash, because he was a big user of Coravin in Timeless in his restaurant. And he'd go, Greg, I love Timeless. I love Coravin, but it's too slow. It takes too much training. If the guy doesn't know how to use it, they waste gas and they break needles, and it doesn't work with every closure. Sure, it works with screw cap, but it doesn't work with plastic. It doesn't work with Venalock. I can't use it on T-tops and sherries. And I was like, you like Coravin? What part? And so I invent almost everything on a plane ride back from Australia. And so I was 23 hours in the seat. And so I came up with Pivot. Pivot is a system that doesn't care what the closure is, because you pull it. So you undo the screw cap, you pull the cork, you remove the Venalock, the T-top, whatever it is that the sake guys use, those crazy closures. And then you replace that with a stopper. So we developed our first stopper after our screw cap product. And so you just place this into the top of the bottle without pouring any wine. That's very important, because it's very little gets in when you open the bottle, but a lot gets in if you pour an open bottle. So you crack the bottle, you put this in, and then because we made the stopper, we designed a valve that can take a big tube instead of a needle. Tube goes through the stopper, tip it, and then again, press this button, Argon goes in, and wine comes out. Because it's a big tube, the wine comes out really fast. So you can fill a glass in about 5 seconds. It doesn't take training. As soon as you're pushing, you're pouring. You can't waste gas. And in fact, because it's such a big tube, it builds less pressure to pour the same amount of wine, so it uses less gas. It's more efficient. If you can get 15 glasses out of one capsule with the Timeless, you can get 20 using Pivot. So there's a lot of advantages. There's one downside. Stopper's not perfect. A little bit of oxygen gets in over time, so the wine lasts for blind tasting a month. With sake, about 6 months. But we're working on this stopper. It's inexpensive, it's cleanable, it's infinitely reusable, but it's got that slow permeability to oxygen. And so we've developed better materials and better designs. I'm hoping that we can actually make a stopper that lasts for years. Because heck, why not? Everyone should be able to go to Pivot if they want to. And so that was Pivot, which we launched the first couple of months of the pandemic. It's been used a lot in restaurants because they don't need their wines to last for longer than a month. It pours so fast, takes a little training. A lot of wineries are using it. A lot of restaurants are using it. Some people at home are using it, especially if you don't drink many wines. A month is great. For me, that wouldn't work. I've got 800 different wines by the glass in my house. So it takes me a while to get through all 800. I use Timeless a lot. I use Pivot on sake. I love sake. I used to live in Japan. And they use crazy closures. So I actually have a bottle of sake here.
Craig, what's the, I guess I should have asked this when you were talking about Timeless, but what's the key to making sure that, I guess regardless of what cork you have, but I guess when you use natural cork, that the hole that's made closes up? So one time I Coravin put it right back on its side in my cellar and it leaked, which I assume was my fault for not leaving it upright and giving it a second maybe to close up. What's the trick to making sure that the natural cork closes?
Yeah, I'll give you that trick, and then my techniques for optimizing the preservation of the wine in general with Coravin. So cork is a natural tissue, and it's the most elastic solid we've ever found above the surface of the earth, which is pretty badass. And it's great that we found it. Bless the Spanish and the Italians and the French. The thing is, though, that cork's elasticity is dependent upon two things. It's age as well as temperature. So really old corks or really cold corks take a little bit of time to close. And it's okay. We use argon. It's heavier than oxygen. No oxygen will get in while it's closing. And it tends to close from the bottom up. And so the inside of the bottle out, because when you pull the needle out, the first part the needle leaves is the inside of the bottle. And so it starts to close from the bottom up. I would give a cold cork, particularly a white wine that you keep cold or anything coming out of your actual food refrigerator, I would give that a minute to 2 minutes to close before you put it on its side. The same is true with an old cork. Give it a little bit more time to close before you put it on its side. You should store it on its side. You should cellar wine that has been Coravin, whether it's Pivot, Sparkling, or Timeless. They all last better if they're stored on their sides. All wine should be stored in lower temperatures. It drops chemical reaction rates, which is important. And then try not to have light, heat, and vibration. I have a lot of people who say, oh, my wine with Coravin had aged. I was like, where'd you store it? Over the stove. Like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, light, heat, vibration, Argon doesn't help with.
Mhm.
And the wine will still go bad. So keep it cool, keep it dark, keep it on its side, and the wine will last well. So I call it the 4 C's of Coravin. Cellar and cork are 2 of them. I've talked about cellaring. Cork, the quality of cork is variable, especially if you get an older bottle. I like to check a cork before I Coravin it. I put my hand around the neck and push down on the cork. If the cork slides, don't use timeless. The cork is run out of elasticity and it's not going to reseal and it'll oxidize. If the cork doesn't slide, feel free to use timeless. Whenever I get a cork that slides, I use pivot. Pull the cork, pivot, and I've got at least a month. So cork is one thing. Clean and clear. Cleaning. People think of Coravin like a corkscrew and you never wash your corkscrew. It is not a corkscrew. It is a glass. Think of it like a glass. So you have to wash it. And that means hot water through the spout at the end of any day where you've used it is really important because there can be, if you like Chateauneuf or if you like Lebanese wines, there's a lot of Brettanomyces in those wines. And that stuff will grow out on the inside of your Coravin. So if you've never washed your Coravin and you've used it a lot, pour cheap vodka down the spout and kill everything first, and then use hot water from there on out to keep your Coravin clean. Super important. Clean and then clear. So before I access a bottle of wine, just before I push the needle through, I give the trigger a quick press. And when you press it, a little bit of gas goes through and basically clears the system of any wine or air that is in there. It pushes it out using Argon. And so that means that the very first thing that's going to go into your bottle is not oxidized wine. It's not air. The very first thing that's going to go in is Argon. So clear it just very quickly before you put the needle through the cork. So if you do those 4 things, you can get wine to last timeless out decades.
So there's no issue with getting the entire unit wet. It sounds like if I'm pouring vodka down that little spout, I can spill a little bit on it. And
yeah. Water is fine.
Yeah.
Water's fine. Vodka's fine. Just don't put it in the dishwasher.
Sure.
Temperature rises, gas pressure rises, not good. But you can use hot water and clear it. It's water resistant, waterproof. Sparkling, you'd asked why. When we launched in London, we invited press to a big blind tasting. And Victoria Moore from, The Guardian was there. She's great. And so she's sitting in the crowd and I demonstrate Coravin for the first time and I'm super psyched to introduce it to everybody. And London's a great wine city. And Victoria Moore, immediately, she goes, does it work with sparkling? No. I just spent 11 years to dissatisfy Victoria Moore. And so I was like, wow, okay, sparkling wine. That was 2013, 14. And so we immediately started working on it. And it took me 8 years. It took me and the team 8 years to solve sparkling. It's a complicated problem, right? The wine not only can oxidize, but it can lose pressure and go flat. And so I used to drink sparkling wine on holidays or special occasions because you were committing to the bottle, right? It can go flat and oxidize. It'll probably go flat first. And you've got very little time. And the more times you open it, the more gas you're letting out. And even with the stoppers, and that gas never goes back in. So it's constantly losing pressure. And so we knew we had to restore the pressure. I tried putting a needle through the champagne cork and for 3 years. I could do it, but not really. And it took an octopus with a PhD to make it work. We realized, one of my engineers realized, a guy named Otto, he was like, isn't CO2 heavier than air? Isn't there a lot of CO2 in the wine? Isn't it sparkling in the glass or isn't it sparkling in the bottle like it's sparkling in the glass? Isn't that CO2 helping to minimize the air that gets in while we're pouring? Why don't we just seal it with our own stopper now that we've learned about materials and repressurize it to get the perlage protected and see what we can do? And so he came up with this idea along with our manufacturers who helped design the stopper. And we wound up making it super easy to use. It's just got a stopper. You pull the cork like you normally would. You pour the wine like you normally would. Put our stopper back on and pressurize. And it sounds simple, but making a stopper that fits on absolutely every single bottle, hard. Finding a material that doesn't allow oxygen in or CO2 out, hard. CO2 goes right through silicon rubber, and oxygen, importantly, goes right through silicon rubber. So we had to find a new material, a medical material that doesn't allow anything through. And then we had to find a pressure to set to recharge the wine. So we were very good at regulators, and we started testing different pressures, which meant it had to work with all sparkling wines. And so you got sparkling wines that are 2 atmospheres, like Prosecco, and you've got sparkling wines at 7 atmospheres, like California Sparkling. How do you pick a pressure that doesn't make Prosecco too bubbly or California Sparkling flat? And so luckily this was the pandemic. So I tested 225 different sparkling wines from around the world with different stopper designs, different pressures, everything else, doing these blind tastings. I had a pretty good lockdown period testing through all these sparkling wines. And we came up with something that totally exceeded my expectations. And sparkling changed my life. I've just started opening wines that have been under Coravin Sparkling for a year, and they're great, down to the last glass.
Wow.
Yeah, they're awesome. Moet Hennessy tested it during our development period. So they've got Krug and Ruinart and Dom Perignon and Veuve Clicquot and Chandon. And I came out there as soon as we were allowed to fly to Europe and visited Cellar Master at Veuve Clicquot. And I said, we're saying that it lasts for a month. And he goes, that's incorrect. You are wrong. And I was like, oh no, he found a flaw. And he goes, lasts at least 3 months.
Oh, nice. That's great.
Yeah. So
well, I mean, that I guess that brings me to one of the last questions about the products, and that's you spend so much time testing and iterating before you actually bring it to market and the trials and stuff. What, in terms of the pursuit of version 2, version 3, version 4 of each of these products, is it really trying to continue to extend the length and life, or is it improving? Like, what improvements on the products do you expect as the company continues to mature?
Yeah, it's a great question because of the focus that it provides us, right? If you try to go for extension of time, that's one thing. I was very clear with the team when we started. I said, everything we do is going to be faster, easier, more fun to use. It's going to be independent of closure. So cork, screw cap, glass, whatever, and it's going to be still or sparkling. We're going to serve any form of wine to anyone in any way they want, easily, in any setting. And so when we launched sparkling, I remember somebody in the press asked me, are you having an existential crisis? You've done it. You've got everything. I still think there's opportunity for us to improve ease of use. I still think there's an opportunity for us to make it fun and to make it more user error independent. What if somebody doesn't wash it? What if they don't cellar it? What if they don't clean their? And so make it so that in all situations it does well. So we've learned from every device that we've launched little things we can put back into the earlier system. So the material we use for Coravin Sparkling, we can get that back into Pivot, then we can get out to a year, right, with a still wine, or 2 or 3. And I would love to do that. There's one, the other thing that I said when we started was, we exist to expand the ways that people enjoy, serve, and sell wine. We are never going to delete what already exists. We're just going to add new and more fun ways to explore. And so we talked about it at the beginning. One of the fundamental problems about wine is you got to buy a bottle, even with Coravin, to find out whether or not you like it. It's the weirdest sales job on the planet. Imagine a shoe salesman saying, you're going to love these shoes. I know they're $110. You're going to love them. You can't try them on now. In fact, it's not ready to be tried on. You should try this on in about a year. Maybe 2 years when it's ready to be tried on, but you're going to love it. Right? That is a wine salesman's job in a wine store 90% of the time. Or if you're buying online, right? It's just a written word. And you've got to part with money to pay for 5 or 6 glasses of a wine you don't know you like. And so that's why wine with a glass programs are so important in restaurants. That's where people figure out what they like. Right? And they're like, ooh, I love that wine. I'm going to go find that in a wine store. But imagine you could buy a glass of wine at a wine store. And so the reason we developed Vinitas, our latest system, is to try to crack that, to make it so that not only can you serve wine by the glass at home or in a restaurant or wine bar, you could sell wine by the glass at the retail location or at the winery. And so Vinitas is a system that's the world's smallest bottling line, and it can fractionalize a bottle or a tank or a barrel at the winery into smaller bottles, 50 ml, 100 ml, 1875, that you could then sell. That's the dream. And so we're in the mid stages of developing that system. We know we can get the wine out to a year now, but if you're in retail, you need a long shelf life. And so we're working on making that faster, easier, more fun, more durable. I would love for us to be able to crack that and get to essentially sampling at a wine store. Imagine you could buy 700 milliliter samples from a winery, all 7 of their wines, whatever they make, and then taste it instead of buying one bottle. It would be a blast. Wine tasting at home.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, go ahead, Billy. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask on that. Is it like is that say somebody has like a bottle or like a Magnum that they want to bottle down into those 100 milliliters? Is it using a similar? I know you can't give much away because you're developing it, but is it a similar kind of mechanism to what you guys are currently doing? And is it like leveraging more Argon in the same way, or how?
It uses everything we've learned. We have a pre-sealed bottle that's got a screw cap on top with a septum, an area that can be punctured. And the bottle's put into a machine, and you connect the machine to bottle of wine, a barrel of wine, whatever you want, Magnum, as you said. And then we transfer that wine using argon gas into the smaller bottles. So no air touches them. And the way we transfer it is the machine pushes 2 needles through the septum of the pre-sealed bottle and floods it with argon gas and then fills it with wine, so that the wine never touches air while it's being transferred. And then it removes those needles and the septum. And so you wind up with this small bottle that can last a year. And so we have it currently in wineries in California, Australia, Italy, and in retail, in a distribution group in the UK, and in one pioneering restaurant in Germany, who's selling wine by the glass that he pre-fractionalizes. So he brings out tasting sets to people, and that's what he does. I think it's called Bottles and Bones in Munich. A great sommelier started that place. And we're looking at the different places. Once you get to reformatting wine, you're stuck with the legal system about wine bottling and who can bottle. And then you find all these esoteric things, like you cannot, because of the rules of Barolo, you cannot put something into something smaller than 375 milliliters and still call it Barolo.
Interesting.
And there are laws that we've got to comply with that slow it down, which is unlike the rest of Coravin. So we're trying to figure all that out.
Nice. Yeah, I think I just wrapped up my WSET diploma, and for the last exams, I got little samples that had little Coravin logos on it that were my tasting things. Yeah, that's pretty good. I was gonna say they worked really well. Nice.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I would keep them for. I kept the non-used ones for a long time. Cool. I was just wondering if that was you guys. And then my only other tip to continue to make these things idiot-proof is once I had a cork. I didn't take the foil off. I didn't think to check the cork. And I just kept trying to jam my Coravin needle into it. And it was a glass stopper.
Vinitas, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Vitalock.
Well, yeah, I should have locked it. But I was going to say, making the timeless idiot-proof, if you ever have any sort of battery on your Vinitas, maybe it lights up in the future, just an alarm when that needle's about to snap would be great. If I just had like, alert, you're ruining it. And then it just breaks. So
I would imagine I might be able to guess the producer. Heinrich, was it Heinrich from Austria that your glass cork was on?
No, I don't.
Wonderful, bad, crazy, wonderful person puts Vitalock under foil, and so you can't tell. He's broken more needles than any other producer.
I think it might have actually been Henschke. They have a couple that are under glass that I brought back from Australia, so I think it was one of those. If I have to say.
It's the H group, Heinrich and Henschke. I've talked to the guys at both. Stop it. Yeah. Cut your foil. You can see the cork.
Yeah, that's the real answer is just do that.
He's got the foil. I almost never do. So I've broken a needle on Heinrich.
You've been at this long enough to like, and you've talked to enough producers and now consumers, I'm sure. Have you seen the industry change or like consumer interest or parts of the industry change as a result of the accessibility that you bring to wine tasting and exploration now?
I think the wine industry is changing because our population always changes, and it's a global question, right? I'm everywhere. So China was the fastest growing market for Coravin and for wine. Then the pandemic hit and it collapsed. Right there, it fell about 60%, and so things can change depending upon where you are. There's a temperance movement in Europe, in France, in particular. You wouldn't think, but wine in moderation. And then these health reports came out about wine, questioning the health benefits of wine. And I think that's really set the industry back. We had the pandemic where everybody drank, right? Like crazy. And champagne ran out of champagne during the pandemic. And so we saw that. Now there's a lot more premium wine available and the people are having to lower their prices a bit. And then there's generational shifting, right? Millennials drink a lot of wine. Gen Z doesn't, or at least not yet. And so there's a lot of concern in the industry about that. Finally, there's global warming. I was talking to Runar Frederic Panayotis, and he's with, and also the guys at Pierre Payard. I have a lucky life. I get to meet with these guys in France. And they said it's not long before champagne's going to hit 14%, 15%. The weather is changing. We're picking as early as we can. We don't want to taste green. So we gotta figure this out. And Runar has actually made a global warming wine that they've launched. And so all of those are trends. I think luckily for us, Coravin has intersected with all of them. Wine in moderation, Coravin's great. You don't have to commit to the bottle. A lot of reasons why people drink too much is they drink the bottle because they have to, right? It's open. And so I'm going to finish it. We're not going to leave that. It's a good bottle. What are we doing? And so with Coravin, that's not necessary. I think the millennials and the Gen Zers broke the connection with Bordeaux and Burgundy and Napa. And they wanted to explore the world of wine and try Croatian wines and wines from all over the world. And that is something that we connect with very, very well. And then I think the restaurants really, they had a lot of wine and asset that were just sitting there that they could now serve by the glass, larger formats. Who sells a Magnum Petrus, right? But you can sell it by the half glass. And so that, I think, we've been very lucky to intersect with the wine industry at the time that these things were happening. And I think the other thing that's really helped us is that over the last 15 years or 10, 11 years, Coravin's been on the market. The improvement in wine quality and wine making has been extraordinary. There is more better wine being made in more places than ever before. And so the opportunity to explore the world through this fermented grape has never been better. Whether it's tourism and traveling out to these places, which I highly suggest people do if you ever get a chance to visit these wineries and these people. Wine is made by wonderful people in beautiful places, almost exclusive. And getting out there and seeing them, you smell the air, you see the dirt, you feel the weather, you really get an understanding and you fall in love in a different way. So I'm psyched about the wine industry. I know that it's going to have some struggles right now at the premium end in particular with the drop in wine consumption. It seems to be a pretty global thing recently, but it'll come back. It's an 8,000-year-old beverage and it's going to be with us for another 8,000 years. It's the most social thing, right? Wine. It's the beauty of it. It connects people and conversation and relaxation, tastes and smells, and memories. I'm insanely lucky to have come up with this idea and been able to find this tangential path into the wine industry.
Yeah,
with zero training, right?
You guys make a lot of that possible for a way and exploration possible for a way broader group of people. So we definitely appreciate the work that you guys are doing and hope that you continue to innovate. And excited for this partnership to spend time with you guys and to be able to promote what you're doing over the next 6 months. I hope our listeners get a lot out of that, and I'm sure they will. Greg, thanks for sharing the story. Thanks for talking about your life as an inventor and also your vision for Coravin. I think you have a really clear idea of what you're trying to achieve. I appreciate that.
Well, we're really psyched to be working with you guys and to be enjoying getting the word out to more and more people, not only about Coravin, but this incredibly wonderful world of wine that we're in.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. That was our interview with Greg Lambrecht. I hope everybody enjoyed and learned a little bit more about Coravin, how it works, how to take care of it. And again, this episode and every episode moving forward for the next 6 months will be presented by Coravin. You can give the gift of exploration with Coravin, opening a world of wine experiences without fear of waste. I was just home visiting my parent, and we are certainly going to gift them a Coravin. So you should think about what you want to gift it to. Using the code VINT15, again, you get 15% off any gifts for you or your family. And that is our episode for this week. We'll be back with another episode next week. Cheers.